So anyways, once we got down to Bucaramanga, my sister-in-law picked us up. Just bear with me when I talk about stuff like this, because I'm gonna basically compare it to the United States, which is not fair. Really not fair to anyone to compare anyone to the United States, because, and maybe this is me being a little bit of a judgy asshole, but I just think that in terms of the vehicles we drive, our vehicles in a lot of cases are bigger than they need to be. Like we went from driving sedan-sized cars. Now I know what you're gonna say. They used to have mid-size and full sedans back in the day, which were also gigantic cars. They were like boats. But we've gone from having like a sedan or coupe to, well, just take the sedan, make it bigger, you know, particularly hatchback is what I'm thinking of. Make the hatchback, lift it off the ground a little bit higher than a sedan, expand it back, you know, so it's bigger, it's higher, and we're going to charge you an extra couple $1,000s for this because of course it's going to not necessarily guzzle gas, but it's going to be less efficient. So instead of getting like 28 to 30 miles per gallon, you're going to get probably somewhere in the ballpark of 24 to what, 26 or something like that. I don't know. I've not looked. I know some of the worst vehicles, like heavy duty crew crab trucks that are running on gasoline, get like 15 gallons or 15 miles to the gallon or something ridiculous like that. But you know, that's okay as long as we can keep gas prices at, you know, $2, $3, we're fine. But as soon as those gas prices start creeping up again, now it's the government's fault, not, you know, the fact that you not willing to take responsibility for the fact that you bought a truck that takes more gas, that is less efficient. But you know, you can make those decisions because you're a big boy, big girl. So you know, I'm not going to tell you specifically what to do with your money. But sort of getting back to the point I'm trying to make here, there are a lot of tiny vehicles in Colombia. A lot of like Chinese vehicles, very small, compact vehicles. And I get why. Why would you? I mean, it's a gas thing, trying to be as efficient with your gas as possible, and at the same time, you know, you can't really afford to be filling up a 15-gallon tank unless that's your primary form of revenue. There are a lot of people that are like taxis or what's the word, taxis or Ubers, you know, that you can hire to take you from here to there, which I get. Plus there's a ton of bikes, mopeds, that sort of stuff, which are really good on gasoline as well. So even though gas isn't terribly expensive down there, I think it's like 15, I see, this is where I get into trouble, because when you're down in Colombia, things aren't measured in gallons, they're measured in liters. So I'm not exactly sure what that crossover is, but they're, I think, let me do the math in my head, they're like $2 and some odd cents USD for a liter of gas. So I know that's not as good as a gallon of gas. But their cars seem to take less gas. So I don't know. I don't know if that really makes much difference, but Colombia is very much an area of haves and have-nots. Like, what really surprised me about Colombia, or at least Bucaramanga, where I was at, because we you know, I stayed with my brother in Bucaramanga, his wife in Bucaramanga. They have a little apartment there that's got, actually relatively nice, to be honest with you. It's got 3 bedrooms, 2 baths. I was going to but the kitchen's kind of small. The living room and the dining room are kind of connected. But you know, for where they're at, it's actually very nice. But sort of get to my point. There's a lot of like dichotomy. You'll be walking down the road and you'll go, wow, that's a really nice building. That's a really nice building. And there's a shack. You know. Now, I don't know if it's just because I happen to be there between when someone moved out and when someone's going to move in or something, but I just, in the United States, like that kind of stuff would be like, okay, really nice house, like literal tin shack. Okay, here's $5,000, go somewhere else. I'll buy up your property, build something on it, and then turn a profit. You know, or something like that, you know, for better or worse. But one of the things that kind of interests me about it was, you know, in the United States, when the bottom falls out, you're like, it's very difficult. I wouldn't say to get back on your feet, but when the bottom falls out, you are not left with a lot of options. And by that, I mean, you know, in order to live, you have to have the following things: food. Well, I've one, and a job makes this all possible, mind you. But food, shelter. Okay? And when your shelter, particularly like in the city, you live in the city, you don't have to drive. But it's very expensive to live in the city. So like a couple $100,000 plus for a small place to live. So now you got to make sure that you're making at least $1,000 to pay your rent. Then you need to probably make at least $500 at least for food and electricity and other sort of expenses that go along with it, you know what I mean? And then unless your job's right across from where you live, you probably are also going to need to pay for some amount of transportation. We'll just say bus, you know. So, you know, you need to be making a certain amount of money. And like I said, when you can't make, like, when you're making like,
money.
You're not making enough money. Yeah, give me money.
Right,
exactly. You're not making enough money, and you can't afford a place to live, then it makes it very difficult to do the other things you need to do, like clean your body and feed yourself. Sort of, you could. I'm not gonna say you can easily do that, but it's a lot easier to feed yourself as sort of like a primary thing, but like not having shelter is ridiculous. And down in Colombia, there are a lot of poor people, but there are a lot of poor people that have at least something over their head. And because you're down in the tropics, or at least in Bucaramanga, you're in the tropics. Bogota's up in the mountains, which makes it much cooler. But because Bucaramanga, I mean, you're looking at the temperatures year-round being in the 70s or 80s. So it doesn't get terribly hot, like in the 90s, but it doesn't get terribly cold either, like in the 60s, you know? So you don't really need, so they don't really have heat in the apartment, which is kind of weird to me, because like I live in a temperate climate where, yeah, if you don't have heat, you're going to die. Because at some point it's going to get way cold, and way cold could mean anything from, you know, closer to the southern portion of America, you know, 40s and 50s, all the way up to like Minnesota, where it gets into like sub-zero temperatures. So like not having heat is bizarre to me, but you don't need it because it doesn't get cold. Fine and dandy. You know, I get you don't pay for things you don't need, you know. Obviously. But that's sort of, in terms of being very poor, that sort of helps, because now you're not paying for electricity, or you don't have to pay for electricity for heating. You don't have to pay for gas for heating. You don't have to worry about having enough, or it being kept in a container, or someone trying to steal it from you, or whatever. So there are, like I said, there's some things that living in a poor country like that, and I wouldn't say that the people necessarily are just like lazy. It's just sort of the nature of their economy right now, anyways, is that they're sort of on the poor side. But they seem to be rebounding now. You know what I mean? Like they're doing better than they used to be. But like I said, there are just some weird things about it where you'll, as you start driving out of the city, you'll start getting in closer to the mountains. And in the mountains, there's a lot of shacks, or like communities that are built on shacks on top of shacks, practically. On the opposite end of things, they have malls. Like, the malls are smaller. Like, their department store mall is much smaller than, say, our, U.S. malls are. Like a corner store that you might have, like a Macy's or a Boscoff. That will be much smaller. It'll be probably the size of sort of like a medium size. It doesn't have multiple floors. It's just sort of a medium size store that you would walk into that might have like coats and everything you could necessarily need as a shop. And obviously they have smaller grocery stores in the city, so you have your little shops that you go to, and like in a lot of ways life is, I wouldn't say simpler there. It's definitely different. And I know I keep saying that, but like people have cell phones and drive motorcycles, and they have shops that sell expensive goods, but there's also plenty of places where you can get your daily meal for super cheap. Even in terms of Colombia money, cheap. And they're everywhere. I mean, we're not just talking about, well, you gotta go down to the local McDonald's and pick up a burger for $1. No, I mean, like, there are street vendors everywhere selling local cuisines, and they're advertising their prices like, I can't even remember, honestly, some of these prices. Like, I want to say, like, someone was selling, like, sort of a basic, like, sandwich type item for, like, 5,000 Colombian, or not even 5,000, like 500 or 750 Colombian pesos, which is less than $1 US dollar. The US dollar would be about 4,000, 4,500-ish right now. So, like, in a way, I feel kind of feel bad for them because, they're, they don't have as much. They're sort of living within their means, and in that regard, you're like, I sort of like feel like, good for you guys. You know what I mean? Like, you're able to live within your means, and I'm not gonna say these people are unhappy. Certainly don't know. But they certainly seem to find a way to make things work for them. They do a lot of, another thing they do a lot of is they do partial payments for things. Like, my brother and sister, instead of having to pay their electric bill through the mail or online, they go to like a local store that processes their bill for their electric. And so they go to, like, I don't know, like, it's kind of like, I want to say like kind of like a tiny 7-Eleven or something, but it's not even like brand name. It's just like, they happen to be, you ever see like a local diner or business, it might have like, it'll be like Joe's Diner, and then below it, it'll say Coca-Cola or Pepsi or something. So they're getting, Coca-Cola's getting their, advertising dollars out there. At the same time, Joe gets a free sign for his business, or a reduced sign, or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how that works. Used to be more common now than nowadays. Nowadays is like, well, everyone drinks Coke anyway, so why the fuck do I need to give you a sign? But yeah, that was very interesting. We went to a lot of places outside the city as well. We visited my brother and his wife at their workplace. But they were on, I'm like, well, down there, because it's always warm and they can always grow shit. They don't have to have like a quote unquote summer break, a dedicated growing season for the farmer's children to be off so they can help mom and dad on the farm. Instead, they take like a week or 2 week breaks every so often. So we happened to go down during one of their breaks. So my brother and my sister-in-law were off work because they were on a holiday break or whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, we weren't like interfering with their work schedule per se, but at the same time, like, seemed like parts of the city weren't entirely there. Like, my niece's daycare center was only running part day because, again, they were all on vacation, like school vacation, that is, not like a Golden Week Japan thing. And so we went to a couple local places. They got a nice little her daycare centers like 2 blocks up from where they live. They've got a nice little park about a block or 2 down that has a playground, a little like area that you can walk around that's a little more nature-y. And they have like a little cat sanctuary there where they feed and take care of the cats. And at the same time, you can adopt these cats if you want to. Take them home. I don't know how well that would work.
Love, dear Presidente.
But there were a lot of stray animals in Colombia. I don't know if they're owned by anyone or if they're just stray animals. But none of them were aggressive. Like you would imagine you would have wild dogs that are tame and just looking for a handout, and you'd have wild dogs that, yeah, you better stay away from them. They're going to tear you or your baby up. But there were none of those, because I feel like, either it's sort of an environmental thing, like, hey, you're a rabid dog, I'm going to put you down. Oh, you're an aggressive dog, I'm going to put you down. So eventually you're only left with mild-mannered pooches or whatever. But again, I'm not sure if all these dogs are strays or if they're owned by someone and they just don't have a very strict collar law per se. I don't know. I don't know, unfortunately, enough about Colombia. But we went to all kinds of different places. We went up into... Oh, and also everything in Colombia runs a lot slower than it does in the United States. Obviously, America just, rush. Whereas you go overseas, I've heard about France and UK, because my parents went there, talk about when you sit down for a meal, you have that table. That is your table. They are not going to try to find out what you want to drink, get it to you, figure out what you want to eat, and try to turn your table as quickly as possible. They want you to enjoy your food. It's going to take a little while to make, because they're making it from scratch. So there's less preservatives, but you're also only getting what they can serve, which in most cases, there's nothing that you really need to be concerned about, because whatever's on the menu, they're going to have in stock. So, they'll have a couple beef dishes, some chicken dishes, fish dishes. If you want something green, like a salad, they have salads and fruit. A lot of fruit down there. Oh my God. They love anything that comes from a cow, milk, beef, anything that comes from a cow is like number 1. Number 2 would be fruits. They just grow everywhere. I'm walking down past my brother's apartment building, and there's fucking fruit trees dropping fruit into the street, which is not a great thing, but wherever my brother's located, I guess, is a nicer place. So they've got people that basically their job is to take care of the building as well as the surrounding sidewalk and street. So they make sure that every morning that fruit or stuff is swept up and the steps are clean and all that fun jazz stuff. So we went up in the mountains for a lunch. That was really nice. But like I said, it was sort of slower paced, but it was sort of like eating dinner too. So like unlike in the United States where you kind of just go like, okay, I'm gonna have a sandwich for lunch, or I'm gonna have some fast food for lunch. No, like you sit down, you have like a meal, and then that meal is like your main food for the day. And then in the evening, you'll have something small to tide you over till breakfast, which works super good duper if you don't have good tummy things, which sometimes I don't have very good stomach, and I try not to eat after 6 o'clock because I need to digest for a couple hours before I go to bed. Fine. But that certainly helped me out a lot. I know there's a way to, by the way, I know there's a way to toggle between the different garden structures. I can't remember what it is. I'll figure that out at some point, maybe. But then we also went we went on a cable car ride that went from the top of one well, it's not the tallest mountain, obviously. That's much taller mountains up in Bogota, but went from the top of one mountain all the way down towards the river, and then it comes back up on the other side of this other very tall mountain to the other side. Tour guide tried to claim that it was deeper than the Grand Canyon. I don't believe that. I just think it's probably some sort of information that he either incorrectly learned or he's trying to bamboozle us. You go, wow. So, my niece, because me and my mom are constantly going, wow, wow. I think she started mimicking us because as we were coming back on the cable car, she kept like looking out the window going, wow. Which was one of the highlights, one of the big highlights of the thing. She's adorable and hilarious. And my niece. But she had all kinds of kind of fun things that she would do. And, you know, she's that age, so that if you say something or you do something, she's very likely to mimic it because she wants to be like the adults or, you know, look more grown up than she is. And then one day we went to kind of like a resort. I put resort in parentheses here because, like I said, everything in Colombia is smaller than America and it's a little bit slower pace than America. So this resort had like a place that you could see animals, and they had goats wandering everywhere, just sort of keeping the foliage, the weeds down. They were just everywhere. They weren't everywhere, but there were like 3 or 4 goats that you would see, and they'd just be walking down the path, and anything that was sticking out in the path, they seemed to like just gnaw it down until it was no longer on the path. I don't know. I don't know if it's an instinctual thing or what, but they would just go and sample all of the weed delights that were overgrowing everything. But this place had a place to fish. Mind you, it was hand fishing. There were no rods. You'd throw out your line on a spool, and you'd pull it back in, and you'd bait them. You know, I didn't do this because I wasn't interested in doing any fishing. I was just sort of there to relax and there to sort of enjoy my brother and their company. But they had a pool that was filled with water that comes off the mountain. So imagine a mountain and the water, you know, obviously you have rain or snow or whatever on the mountain, and then it slowly trickles down into, you know, I don't know, streams, and then, you know, larger streams to essentially get to a larger body of water. And in this case, there was a waterfall that comes where the water collects and comes down off the mountain, and then it fills up this smaller pool, and then from the smaller pool it fills a larger pool. Now the smaller pool is basically there, so if you want to sit underneath the waterfall, which is very cold because it's coming off the mountain again, you can do that. And I was watching some people just like shivering because the water's just so icy cold coming off that thing. But it's good for you. Everything that's bad for you is good for you. You know, everything that feels bad for you is good for you, except for a heart attack, which is terrible, but I'll get there. So long story short, we had fun up there. It was just a little smaller than I was anticipating. And then eventually we flew back to the United States, which was great. You know, nice being away. Good to come home again.